Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. For this review we are going to return to a brewery that you've seen me review many beers from before. I believe this must be review number 15 or so involving these guys here on the channel, and this is a brewery that I would always recommend if you're interested in sour beers, wild ales and things like this. I think it's fair to describe this brewery as the OG, the original sour beer brewery here in Sweden, and I've had really interesting beers from these guys in the past. So for this review then we are going to go back to Landskrona, a little bit to the north of me here in Lund, and I used to work there as a science and maths teacher of course, but we're going to have a look at yet another beer from Brekeriet. So this one is called the Kings Goblet. It comes in at 13% ABV, and they're describing this one as a strong ale, but apparently it's been aged in Rioja wine barrels for 9 months, as had the Noble Ek that I reviewed for you a couple of videos ago. These two beers were released together on the 1st of September 2020 as part of the Lokalt Småskalig release that we get every month through Systembolaget, where all the Swedish breweries can release their things. But yeah, both of them caught my eye, so I kind of thought, well, I've not had anything from Brekeriet in quite a while, let's have a little bit of a treat and see where we go with it. But this beer cost me, I believe, 120 or 130 Swedish kroner, so that is roughly, it's about £11, £11 sterling, British sterling, about 12-13 euros, something like that, and maybe about $14 for this bottle, and it's a 700 milliliter bottle. I'm not sure what that is in the crazy American measurement system, but yeah, it's a fairly kind of substantial one, this, and I will be sharing this with my friends after I film this video. So yeah, curious to see what this has in store for us. The Noble Ek, which was released at the same time, as I said, was a very good beer, and you know, these Rioja wine barrels that they're using for these are very interesting, actually Spanish wine. So yeah, wine is very nice, but you know, I'm not as geeky about that as I am about craft beer and sake and whiskey and stuff like that. There's too many things out there that are very nice to try. But yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So let's see how we get on. As always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brekeriet before, and you will no doubt see more from these guys at some point in the near future. I do need to see about getting them in for a Meet the Brewery segment. That's something I'd love to do with these guys. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brekeriet then, on to my brewery notes. So Brekeriet were originally based in Djursholm, which is just outside of Malmö, kind of to the east over towards the Sturup Malmö airport, but these days they're based in Landskrona, which is a bit to the north of me in Lund, right on the kind of coast of Skåne actually. But the company was founded back in 2011 by the Ek brothers. This is Fredrik, Christian and Andre. Ek of course translates into English as oak, as in the type of tree, and it's a specialist brewery in wild beers using both Brettanomyces and Lactobacillus, and these guys were the first brewery in Sweden to do this, and they remain the only dedicated sour beer brewery to date as far as I understand, although there are some other very good sour beer breweries these days. Morgendagens, Duck Pond, Örebro Bryghus, Jemadal and Hantverks Brewery. There's loads and loads of very good sour beer breweries here in Sweden these days, and Brekeriet were the ones who kind of kicked the whole trend off, if you like. But the original brewery was based in an old brew house in Djursholm, like I mentioned, and this was actually a kind of share commune type brewery for the local farmers. But the guys from the Ek family, they brewed their first beers there in 2012, and this brewery had a very modest production capacity of 500 litres per brew, and this gave them a yearly output of around 38,000 litres. They continued to expand that over the next few years, building up their clientele and things, but as of 2015 they have a new brewery in Landskrona where they can produce 20 hectolitres per brew, and they now have a fermentation capacity of 80 hectolitres litres as well. I'm not sure if that figure is still accurate. They may well have upgraded that over the last while, but yeah. Initially they were producing their Wild Bunch, which is their non-sour series beers, continually in Landskrona, but they brewed the Sour Patch beers, which was the mixed fermentation sours, and specialty one-off beers in Jørsløv for about 1.5 years, but then all production moved to Landskrona in 2017. When they created a separate area they created a separate area for mixed fermentation as well, so they can do different kinds of brews and things like that. And they've also now got the Veiled series as well, which has been out for a few years, and these are the barrel aged beers. And quite often they just brew extra batches of ones that you will see quite regularly on the shelves, put them into the barrels, and just see how they turn out. And they use a variety of different yeast strains for these kind of barrel aging projects. Some of those beers are very, very interesting actually, and I do have one of those that I'll review for you on the channel fairly soon. That was a collaboration with Fürst Viatschik from Germany. But in 2020 they also started distilling, and they released the first products from that in the latter part of the year. So they've just started releasing some of their distilling things as well. But one of the really interesting points in history about this brewery is that in 2014 they caused a real stir because they withdrew completely from Systembolaget in Sweden, citing the bureaucracy with the nationalised state-owned shop system, and decided to focus mainly on their exports abroad. So for quite a while, when I first moved to Sweden actually, you couldn't get the Brekeriet beers in the Systembolaget stores, which was kind of unusual. But as of 2016, they managed to get their beers back in. They managed to do a deal with Systembolaget to get them back in there, which I was very grateful about. And as of October 2020, these guys have produced around 185 different kinds of beer. These days, I'm not sure how... I think they are exporting quite a bit. I remember seeing some of these beers in Hong Kong when I was over there. I think I've seen a few of them in Japan, if I remember rightly as well. And you will find them in various random places throughout Europe as well. I think I saw a few of them in the Netherlands when I was down there, come to think of it. But yeah, as of October 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced around 185 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, which is a pretty impressive amount for a brewery that started back in 2012. So that's, yeah, 8 times 50, you know, that's about, you know, 400 weeks. So yeah, beer every 2 weeks basically, a new beer from these guys roughly every 2 weeks. So yeah, really nice brewery. This one, I always enjoy trying the different things that they're producing, and for me, the thing that really is the signature style, I guess, of Brekeriet would be the kind of the clean, crisp sours, if you like. You know, what I'm thinking the best ones. Wrapped in Red is a very nice one. Sour and Salt. Purple Rain was great as well. There's some really, really good sour beers from these guys that you can get very, very easily. So yeah, if you see any of these Brekeriet beers around, if you like a good kind of kettle sour, I guess you could say, one of these more kind of crisp sours, you will enjoy these. So I highly recommend that you check them out. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can really tell you about Brekeriet for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer then. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is pretty nice. You can see the two goblets have fallen over with a lot of money in them, so the King's obviously got a lot of money to buy his booze with. But yeah, you can see the kind of the malt grains growing out in the shape of a crown as well. I have to say the artwork on this one is pretty nice. It says on the side here, King's Goblet, a complex and rustic strong ale aged in Rioja wine barrels for 9 months. Rioja wine, of course, comes from Spain, as I've told you before, and there you can see the Brekeriet bottle cap in this one. You will get two types of Brekeriet bottle caps. Sometimes you'll get the black one with the white bee, but in this case, of course, we've got the white background and the black bee. So it looks very nice. As I said to you earlier, this one is a 13% strong ale aged in Rioja wine barrels for 9 months, released on the 1st of September 2020, along with the Noble Ek. I've heard it's a strong golden ale type one, this. So let's get it out and we will get on with the tasting then. I'm curious to see what this one has in store for us. I always enjoy trying these kind of big crazy beers from Brekeriet. I think this is going to be quite nice. There we are, look at that. Yeah, we've got about a third of it in the glass, which is kind of what we want. That's about right. So yeah, as you can see with this beer, it poured with a very just kind of thin foamy layer on top of it. I would say the head on this one is a kind of creamy fawn colour, but you can see the beer itself, if we put the light through this, it's actually a very kind of rich amber. It's almost the same colour as like a West Coast IPA, West Coast Double IPA perhaps, come to think of it. But yeah, I would describe that as a very rich amber, especially when you put the light through it. I'm not sure how well you guys are going to see that on the camera, of course, but to me it's a very rich amber, very slightly mahogany coloured beer. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but overall it does look pretty damn nice. And you can see the head has faded away to just be a very thin foamy layer with that nice kind of ivory fawn coloured ring around the edge. But I mean, overall it does look pretty nice, I have to say. I like how this I do like how this goes together. Lovely. It just looks, it really does look like a, you know, a double IPA, a double West Coast IPA, something like that. So yeah, I'm curious, you know, the Rioja wine, from what I gather, is mainly a red wine, and I could have sworn when I tried the Noble Eck that it actually tasted like it was a white wine barrel-aged beer. But this one, certainly, the colour that you get out of this beer, if this is a strong golden ale, I don't know how barrel aging tends to affect the colour of beers. It's not something I've thought about too much, but I would think that even if you barrel age the beer, it's not going to affect the colour of it so much, in fairness. I think probably that maybe this one's had a slightly longer boil, or it's got a little bit of a different malt in it or something, because it is described as a strong golden ale, this one, so you would expect a good little bit of a brown sugary element out of this one. But yeah, lovely looking beer, I have to say, and I'm curious to see what this one has in store for us. I really have no idea what to expect from this one. So first off, let's have a little look at the aroma then and see how we get on. But definitely one of the darker strong ales I've come across, I would think. Oh, that does come across pretty nicely. Oh yeah, no, this is straight away, this is a really nice beer. I mean, the thing that you're going to notice about this is that the barrel aged side of it, the backbone of this beer, is the lovely big smooth oak. That really just forms the backbone of the beer. You smell that lovely big smooth oaky note. There's a little bit of vanilla coming out of it, and you do get a little bit of that kind of Werther's Originally, how would we say, a bit of that Werther's Original kind of butter candy type thing to this beer as well. That really forms the backbone. Yeah, that's nice. The wood almost just has a little slight touch of kind of spiciness to it. You can smell it's almost got a little bit of that slightly, I don't know if I want to say cedary spice. It does have just almost a little touch of that kind of woody spicy quality to it, which is very nice. But yeah, there is a good little bit of kind of brown sugar for me in this one. There is definitely a bit of that kind of sweet caramel there, a slightly more highly caramelised caramel, brown sugar, if that makes sense, but nowhere near what you'd expect from, you know, like a Quadrupel, a Doppelbock, a Scotch ale, something like that. It's nowhere near that, but it's just got a really nice kind of slightly more oily caramelly note to it. You do get a wee bit of a biscuity McVitie's digestive note out of this one for me, but I think the woodiness really kind of dominates the aroma of the beer for me. Again, I've always said with sour beers, I don't find the aroma of these overly complex, to be honest with you, but I think that's one of the things that I really like about them. If a sour beer is pulled off well, it's got a slightly more almost simple flavour profile to it, but if it's done well and it's crafted well, they can be very, very satisfying beers, I have to say. I really like that about them. So yeah, the aroma out of this one is very, very nice. Lovely oaky, smooth backbone. There's definitely a little bit of that vanilla coming out of this. A little bit of that butter candy, you know, Werther's Original type thing. Bit of a sweet caramel, some biscuity notes as well. But you can get that kind of vinous note out of it too. So yeah, let's look at the hoppy side of the beer then we'll talk about the kind of sour and fruity side of it. So for me, there is a little touch of, there is definitely a little touch of earthiness to this beer, and that's from the hops, although when it's been aged for 9 months, probably in the first instance they would use slightly older hops so that it doesn't kind of overpower, so that the bitterness from the hops doesn't overpower the sourness of the beer initially. But again, when you age this beer for 9 months, the hops are going to drop out, so you do have a little bit of an earthiness out of this one. There's a wee bit of a herbal quality there, and you can sort of pick up the remnants of a slightly floral character, and there's a bit of grassiness to it as well. So these are all kind of standard things that you should expect from some of these Brekeriet beers. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, you do get a little bit of that kind of vinous sharpness to it, and it has got a wee bit of a red winey character, but at the same time it's got a little bit of white winey note to it as well. You do get that little vinous, kind of citricy, sharp note out of it, but again it's not too, pardon me, throat's not doing too well tonight, it's not doing too, it's not coming across as too sharp, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, the way that this goes together, I feel, is really nicely done. So on the fruity side of things, for me, there's a little bit of, I think you've got that typical kind of appley peary sort of thing out of this one. You do have some of that in here. I want to say there's a wee touch of a red fruity note to it. You do get a little bit of that kind of red grapey sort of thing, I think, from the Rioja wine. This one definitely has a little bit more of a kind of red grapey character to it. And it's almost, to me, there's just a wee bit of a kind of almost slightly juicy figgy quality to this one. Yeah, there's a wee bit of a red fruity character. You've got that peary, almost slightly appley kind of thing to it. Maybe a little touch of gooseberry. And then you've got that kind of vinous type quality to the beer as well, which is really interesting. So yeah, the aroma coming out of this one, I think, is very nice. It's got a lovely smoothness in the backbone. There's a few kind of brown sugary sweet notes to it there. It's got the typical kind of hoppy notes that you'd expect, but the fruity character for me comes across as a little bit more complex and things. So yeah, take a little bit of time to just mull over the aroma of this beer before you get stuck into it. But we're going to have a taste of this now and see how we go on. The one thing that you wouldn't pick up from this, I think, is that it is 13% ABV. The kind of smoothness of the wood and the kind of the vinous notes and the sour side of the beer and the fruits really cover that quite well in my mind. So yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and go for it. This one is the King's Goblet, a 13% strong ale aged in Rioja wine barrels for 9 months from Brekeriet in Landskrona here in Skåne in the very south of Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål. Oh yeah, that is a nice beer, I will say that. First impression of it is that it's very oily and quite big and smooth actually. It's one of these kind of sours, a big oily, smooth kind of thing. You do get the booziness out of this as soon as you take it in. I don't think the booziness is quite as noticeable in the aroma as it is when you first actually take a sip of this thing. Yeah, I think this beer really is more. It's a lot. I actually wasn't sure. I mean, when it's 13%, you do expect it to be a little bit bigger and a little bit oily. And I think this is probably the strongest beer that I've ever had from Brekeriet. Come to think of it. But this is quite different actually. But I will say to them straight away, they've done a solid job of this. This is a really interesting one. Yeah. And they say rustic with this beer. It really is actually. It's actually, I couldn't really detect that in the aroma and things, but with the woodiness that this beer has, it actually has a little bit of a kind of bready and sort of grainy character coming out of it as well the further you go into the aftertaste. It's really interesting how this one develops on the palate. It's a very nice beer actually, and it's worth trying if you get the chance. I think this is a really quite interesting one. So yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this then and see how we go. So straight away with this beer you can feel that nice kind of woody smoothness just blanketing the middle of your tongue, that lovely smooth oak, and as you move further forward on the palate towards the border between the kind of middle third of your tongue and the front third of your tongue, you get a wee bit of that slightly sweet, smooth vanilla type quality coming out of the beer, which is good. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, this one. The other thing you're going to notice about this beer is that in that woody side of the beer, there is almost a wee bit of a breadiness kind of sits on top of that woody quality, but you get a lot of graininess and a lot of spiciness, I think, just come out of this beer the further that you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, the wood is forming the base, middle third of your palate, back third of your palate, you can feel a little bit of that kind of, it's almost just got a wee bit of a kind of wholemeally bready sort of thing, but at the same time it feels like it's a sort of woody, kind of spicy character actually. So I really like how that goes together. The fruity side of this beer and as well is complementing that very, very well. But yeah, the backbone of this one, middle third of your tongue and back third of your tongue, nice smooth oaky woodiness, a little bit of vanilla at the front, then almost a little bit of a kind of spicy woody, like wholemeally bread sort of thing sitting on top. And then in the middle of the palate there's definitely a wee bit of a kind of brown sugary sort of thing. But what you can feel is if you go to the back third of your palate, I think there's a slightly thicker bready quality to the beer. And that just, that sort of sits there the further that you go into the aftertaste. It does smoothen out a little bit, which I think is quite nice. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it really does smoothen out a little bit the kind of breadiness that you have in the back, but you do get a little bit more of that graininess on that back third of the palate. But yeah, as you move further forward, you can feel that slight breadiness that the beer has. It just goes down a little bit as you reach that middle third of your tongue, and that's when you get those kind of boozy brown sugary notes sitting on top of the kind of spicy woody sort of base that the beer has. So if you go to the very centre of your palate there, you will get a wee bit of you will get quite a strong, boozy, very dark, highly caramelised brown sugar at this one. I'm reluctant to call it treacle and molasses because it's not sweet, it's actually almost dark and quite bitter in some ways. But yeah, as you move further out from the centre of your palate, you will feel it does sort of sweeten up a bit. You do get a little element of sweet caramel and almost a little bit more of a biscuity sort of thing. If you go further back, I think, from that centre point of the palate, just move back a little bit, you will get a wee hint of that kind of butter candy type thing, which is quite interesting. But yeah, it's really interesting just how that goes together. There's quite a few really interesting notes to this one. I mean, you do get more of a sweetness to this beer in the beginning, I think, and then when you first take a sip of it, you get a little bit more of that brown sugar. The brown sugar almost comes across as being a little bit more rich, but then the further you progress into the aftertaste, the whole feel of the beer just gets a little bit drier and drier. And I really like that about it as well. But yeah, it's an interesting one. The malty backbone of this beer is really interesting, and the sour, the barrel aging, I think that has really had a sort of almost spicing effect on this beer. But yeah, it's lovely. I really like it. I like beers like this that do make me think a little bit. But on the hoppy side of the beer, then back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one. As you move further forward, it's a little bit herbal. You can get the remnants of a little bit of a kind of floral note on the front kind of corners of your palate, and then as you go round the front curve of the tongue, it's just a wee bit lighter and more grassy as well. But as I said, when this has been aged for 9 months, most of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this beer. And when it comes to sour beers like this, they're not going to use hops that are too high in alpha acid. It will be some kind of noble hop, maybe a Styrian Golding, a Czech Žatec, a German Hallertau Tettnang, or something like this will have been used in there. And probably, I would suspect, they use a slightly older hop in there that's not got quite the potency that it would have had at an earlier stage in its life. But yeah, you do get a nice little bit of grassiness and herbal qualities and things, and that complements the rest of the beer quite nicely. Let's focus on the sour and fruity side of this one then. I think we've described the other parts of the beer fairly in depth already. So yeah, when you take this beer in, that's when you're going to get the nice kind of sour and fruity sort of things out of this one. This isn't one of these beers that's really, really puckering. It is more kind of rustic, if you like. The sort of It's one of these, I think in fairness, the yeast that they've used in here, does it say on the side of the bottle what it is exactly they've used? It just says yeast rather. So maybe this is a kind of house strain that they've got. This one, it really comes across as more like a very kind of strong farmhousey type ale. I mean, the other thing is you're going to notice that you get more, you know, the woodiness and the slightly herbally qualities that you get out of this beer, the graininess. That, the yeasty notes on the back third of the palate, they become more and more prominent with this beer. But when you take the beer in, as I was saying with the Noble Egg, it's got a wee bit of a kind of red winey element to it. This one, you do get a little bit of that kind of more juicy, purpley, reddy sort of grape note out of this one on the front end. It's the slightly more soury notes, if you like, and the sourness is it's not puckering in the slightest, to be honest with you. Just a little bit sharp in the beginning. When you take this beer in, it is a more kind of juicy, red, kind of purpley grape you get out of this one. But that front third of your palate, where you get those nice juicy fruity esters, is very interesting for me. If you go towards the back of it, you will get, I think, a little bit more of a juicy kind of grapey note out of the beer, a little bit of a red kind of grape. Yeah, when you take this beer in, you do get a little bit of that slightly vinous quality, and it almost, as I say, it almost just comes across as a blend between like a white wine and a almost like a rosé or something like that. It's not so much red wine, and I would always associate Riojas with as red wines. But yeah, it's got the grapey qualities that you get out of this beer develop a lot as you go further into the aftertaste. But as you go further back on that front third of your palate, I think it's more of a kind of red grapey note. Then you start to get a little bit of a kind of figgy quality out of the beer. There's a few things like peary and appley notes to it. And you also get maybe a wee touch of gooseberry as well. Then towards the kind of front part of the palate, you do get these kind of more white grapey, white wine vinous notes out of the beer. So it's a really interesting beast, this one. It's 13%, it's a monster of a thing. And as I said, this is the strongest beer that I've had from Brekeriet so far, but they've pulled this off very nicely, I have to say. I'm not sure how wise it is to sell this one as a 750. Maybe it would work better as a 330, but then again, if it's a big, high, boozy one like this, you know, it encourages you to share. That's the other thing, it encourages you to use this as a share. But I'd love to know how they decide which beers to sell in the big ones and which ones to sell in the small ones. But yeah, it's a very nice an interesting beer, this one. I've really enjoyed tasting this one for you. The more that you go into the aftertaste, and you can feel some of the fruitiness, you start to get this almost kind of fruit, you do start to get a little bit of this kind of cakey, woody, spicy sort of thing sitting underneath that front third of the palate as well. But this is a beer that definitely has, it's really got me thinking. But I have enjoyed it, I have to say that about this. So yeah, thumbs up to Brekeriet for this one. I feel that this isn't such a comprehensive review compared to other Brekeriet beers, but it is just because it's quite different to what they've done before. So if you want, if you're a fan of this brewery and you want something kind of out of the ordinary from them, go for this. A little bit pricey, as I say, but it's on that hand, it is a 750. You know, share it with somebody, find another beer you can split it, do that with it. Yeah, lovely beer, this one, and a big thumbs up to Brekeriet. They seem to be hitting form at the moment, they seem to be doing really well just now. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, what would we say about this beer? What would we say about this? Really has the peary notes out of this are very nice. It's almost, I don't know if you could say this is almost a little bit like a dried apricot-y type quality. So there's a wee bit of a kind of sultana note comes out on the fruity side of the beer as well. Never said that, but yeah, it strikes me as a kind of dried sultana type quality as well. But yeah, mouthfeel, we'll go back to that. I'd say this beer is quite full-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. It's a big oily thing. This is one of the most oily sours, or kind of wild beers, if you like, that I've reviewed for you. I think it's a bit of a, I've fallen into this trap as well. Whenever I see your wild ale sour beer, you know, I always, when you think wild ale, you do think, you know, puckering sours. But, you know, wild ales are like this. They have that kind of rusticy, farmhousey type vibe to them. And that's what this one really comes across more as being a little bit more of. This is more a kind of strong, farmhousey type beer than it is a sour beer. There's a tiny little bit of sourness to it, but you know, it is more of a rusticy farmhouse thing, as they've said. So bear that in mind with this one. But yeah, full-bodied, smooth carbonation, big oily thing for me. In terms of bitterness, very low IBUs. This has got to be like 15 or 20, something like that. The malt base and the woody parts of the beer, it's got a lovely slickness that forms the baseline of the beer. Lovely big oily sugary notes to it as well. A bit of sweetness in the malt base, but the spiciness builds as you go further into it. And then you've got some lovely kind of juicy and slightly oily, fruity characters come out of this one, I have to say. But it's a lovely, lovely beer, and I've certainly enjoyed reviewing this one for you. I like it when breweries do something a little bit different, but this is one of the more kind of rusticy wild ales that you're going to come across, rather than being a big puckering sour actually. And Brekeriet can do some really interesting things like this when they put their mind to it. But if you like a big kind of spicy, woody sort of thing, this one is going to tick all those boxes for you. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one then. So this one was the King's Goblet, a 13% strong ale aged in Rioja wine barrels. It's got a lovely, the fruitiness that you get with this beer I think is kind of spot on for me. So a thumbs up to Brekeriet once again. I think this has been a really interesting beer to review, so let's leave it at that. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brekeriet. We will return to these guys at some point fairly soon, but in the meantime, check out some of their beers. Wrapped in Red, Sour and Salt, Purple Rain are the ones that I would always recommend, and I will have a look and see what they've got on the shelves in Hansa in Malmö the next time I'm there. But a lovely brewery, and one that I always enjoy trying different things from. But thanks again for watching. Check out my social media, check out this brewery, and I will catch you guys later. The King's Goblet, a 13% strong rustic ale, I guess we could say, a strong rustic golden ale, something like that, from Brekeriet in Landskrona in Skåne here in the very south of Sweden. Slange, skull, cheers, and I'll catch you guys on the next review.